Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service. Today I'm going to be presenting the Black Moon Lilith. So thank you for being here and partaking of this video, and hopefully you're going to learn something. So I wanted to do videos that are of astrology subject matters that are more obscure. And so before I even begin talking about the Black Moon Lilith, I want everyone to know that I am not an expert at Black Moon Lilith. I might be a longtime professional astrologer. I am familiar with her, but as an asteroid astrologer, I have not worked with her extensively. So I had to do a lot of research in the last couple of weeks to understand more about her. So one of the things that I did find out first of all, is that there's not a lot written on her. That especially if you go to your older astrology books, we do have material on her out on the internet, and I invite people to go out there, pop it into your Google, see what pops up, and then go check and see what some of the people have written about her. See what resonates with you. That's what I did. Now, before I explain about Black Moon Lilith, I want to talk about the book I'm going to be using. I did pick up some things from the internet, which I'll be using. I use both Astro Cafe, Astro Library, and there was one Lilith Astrology. So those are three of the sites I visited. I want to give them credit. But I found that M. Kelly Hunter's book, which was published in 2010, by the American Federation of Astrologers, AFA, to be a really good cookbook. There are not many cookbooks on the subject of the Black Moon. She does a really nice job of explaining both the true Black Moon, and we're going to talk about that actually when I get to the charts, and the mean dark moon. So there's a mean, and then there's a true. So we'll talk about those. I can tell you the mean is what they used before computers. They had to do an average because they couldn't really pinpoint it well enough. So some astrologers to this day, some programs are still set for mean true, the mean Black Moon. Others are done with the true Black Moon. And this is something that we can do now because we have computers. So that's where the true Black Moon really comes into being. So we're going to talk about her book a little bit. I want to talk about what is the Black Moon. It's not a Black Moon. It's an apogee, which means it's a point the furthest out from the moon. It is a lunar apogee. Cycles around the moon, and it's the furthest point cycling out around the moon. So in the moon shadow. So we have an understanding of what it is, okay, in terms of how we look at it. But let's look at what she is, okay? We know it's an apogee. It's not a physical presence like a planet. But then I come from a school of thought where I've been studying for a couple of decades now, maybe several decades. I've been studying the trans-Neptunians, which are also known as the Uranian planets. They are considered hypotheticals because they're all points in space. But I can tell you, those points really work. They are a part of the work that I do on a regular basis, and I have done enough work with them to say they really work. So when it came to looking at the Black Moon and knowing that she is really, again, a point in space, that really was exciting for me. So I know that I can understand that. I've worked with that, so I don't have prejudice against that. Now, what she is, okay, so she's been in history since the beginning of time. Yes, she has. There are Sumerian myths about her, how she was a handmaiden, okay? So I'm going to get my notes out and just kind of go over what I have for her. She's also part of an Algos constellation of Perseus. It's a mass. It's considered an evil star, actually. Well, again, she's not a star. The Hebrew stargazers refer to her, but again, she's not a point in space. She is a point in space. She's not a star. She's not a planet. So she's not a mass in space. The Sumerians refer to her as a handmaiden to the goddess Iana, Inia, however you say that. She brings in the men for the sacred rites. Okay, so let me explain a little bit about this. In another time, when women had a lot more to do with things, we'll get to that, there were Vestan temples. And I know in the Bible they sometimes refer to these as brothels, but they're not. They are places where only men of great honor can be born. You have to be born of a vessel, a Vestan, in order to take a high place in society. And those ritualistic sexual events, because that's what they were, sort of like ritual sex, produced these children. And the women of the Vestan temples dedicated their life to this. And it was a part of they were the life source. They made sure that the lines, the pedigree, if you will, was somewhat pure. And that was long before his story. So this has a lot more to do with her story. However, I will tell you this, that the very last Vestans became the very first nuns. So that tells you a little bit, doesn't it? So so she's also associated in the same mythology with the trunk of a tree, okay, which is interesting. And it'll be interesting when we get to explain other things further. She's also associated with the Kundalini. If you're familiar with yoga, the Kundalini is your life force at the base of the spine. And from it, particularly through the sexual tantric practices, and it is more of a quote unquote, it's the root chakra, sometimes associated with sex, not reproduction, sex. And I'm going to get to more of that later in this lecture. The Hebrew see her, and this is how I am familiar with her, because anybody from the Judeo-Christian background would know that she is the first wife of Adam. And hopefully I'm not surprising too many people. I know that I have a lot of friends who are quite religious, and when they found out that there was a Lilith, that was kind of weird for them, okay? I study this, so I knew. I didn't realize how many people don't know about her. She was created as Adam was created. They are equal in every way. But the problem is that Adam did not treat her equally to him. And she, being a very strong woman, would have nothing of it. So the theory is, did she leave paradise of her own accord, which is the story that I usually go with, or was she thrown out? Well, I don't know about the thrown out, because they also have attributed her to the serpent, or the tree trunk that carries the serpent, but she's a part of that story. And if she was a part of that story, then she probably wasn't thrown out of paradise, but probably left of her own free will, because if you were thrown out, I don't think you can get back in. I think thus is the end of the Adam and Eve story, is when they do get tossed out. Eve wasn't. She left. That was my feeling. And she left because of an equality thing. She left because she knew her power. And her power is sexual. And so a lot of people who write about her now really get caught up in the whole sexual thing. Women's power is related to their sexuality, but I think it's deeper than just having sex. I think it has a lot more to do with being a life bearer. I think it has to do with knowing one's strength. Women are supposedly the stronger sex when it comes to this side of the coin. I believe that is all true. And I believe it's true when you really start to begin to study the myths of Lilith, okay? Now, before I get into what Lilith represents, let me talk just a minute about Lilith the Asteroid, which is number 1181, okay? That asteroid is a rock in space, not a point, It's a real mass. And in astrology, it is attributed to, which is why we can believe that she did have something to do with the snake, it relates to competition. And when you take two women and a man, what do you have but a triangle? Okay, so that's a competition. And it also refers to sexual gender issues, like gender issues, okay? And if you look at the difference between Lilith and Eve, there is a humongous difference between the two. One is a very independent woman who is her own boss and goes her own way. The other is a woman who is more submissive because she is from him. So the story of Lilith and the story of Eve play very much into the mythology of Lilith and who she is beside Eve, okay? Now, there's a whole lot of things that we can attribute to both Liliths, okay? Lilith is about competition, and the apple eating, I know that she probably did it out of malicious intent, but really, or was it that she wanted Eve to know what she did, or she wanted Eve to be more empowered within her relationship? Women do that for each other all the time. Now, did she do it in a good way or a bad way? I don't know, because we're never going to get the true story. The patriarchal situations, the Jewish and the Christian religions are patriarchs. They are based in male stories. So, which I think is really interesting, because even Christ himself was more about equality. But unfortunately, there has been such a energy put into squashing women through the last couple thousand years, maybe a little longer than that. Women used to run things. Reviving Ophelia, check it out. It's an architectural documentary type book, very interesting. Women did run things because women have babies. Women are life bearers, okay? Men can't carry. If we have only men in the world, get nothing. Okay, if we had only women in the world, you get nothing. But men can't live without women, though they might lead you to think they can. I mean, I've been watching some stuff in the early 1800s and looking at the fact that women were just a little better than cattle. When you realize that that's so not the real truth of everything, that you can understand why Lilith would be sometimes considered a demon. And I will be honest with you, in the Jewish religion, she is considered a demon. Christians just wrote her out. So be aware that she, the Black Moon Lilith, has existed for a long time. She embraces qualities of the moon. Maybe we want to refer to them as the darker qualities of the moon. She is associated with sex, but I look at it like a Hecate. She's also associated with sex and reproduction, okay? Although I will say this, Lilith might not always be about reproduction. Lilith is about desire, okay? It's the denial or delight. It's either you're going to be so powerfully connected to it. So it says magnetism versus the rug being pulled out. Again, I don't know exactly which websites I got some of these sayings. I kind of go in and I read and I kind of get these ideas. Here we're bound by limited realities that reveal our true natures. Black Moon Lilith is what binds us to this earth plane. It's why our souls felt the need to come here in the first place. And then the whole time we're here, our soul is trying to help to get us to be more, it's like shocking us to awareness. It's opening up our desires and then thus changing those desires, particularly if they are not fitting of who we are, those desires, or not fitting of society. They're not acceptable. And it's how we deal with that. You know, people don't always accept people for who they are, but doesn't make them bad people, and it doesn't mean that their messages are wrong. it says the soul is never satisfied till we give up it all. So it's a process of why we keep coming back to Earth, is to work on things. And Black Moon Lilith is really pointing a finger at some of those things. So we can look at this as a heavy-duty karmatic placement. It is the Black Moon where that's where we need to let go. So when we begin to look at the Black Moon in charts, we're going to look at where we need to let go, where we need to begin to, if anything, rise above. It talks about, or get deeper into the lesson, it talks about, it unites us with spirituality, but they do that, here we go again, through sex or through desire. So it's kind of like a weird mix. It's like what we're being drawn to may not be good for our spirit, so we think, because maybe it's something that society doesn't agree with. But it won't let go. There is no reason or logic involved in Black Moon Lilith issues. It's related to instinct and intuition. So we're just doing it because we're like drawn to it, okay? We can either be submissive to those issues or we can suffer repression as a result of these issues. And you would look at this and you would place this with any house or sign. And I'll give some examples, not personal examples, because now you're getting into, I started to do this with like Washington's chart, and he's dead and everything, and I just couldn't go there because I just didn't feel it was unethical. I have a high level of ethicity when it comes to my work. Black Moon Lilith is our ego identity. It not only is what binds us here, but it's a lot of times what our egos surround or are centered by or centered in. It's how we achieve lucidity and personal affirmation. It's where we cross lines, but not in a bad way. A lot of times not in a bad way. Black Moon Lilith is not here to lead you astray. She's here to shine a light in a way, in a dark place. She is about the dark side of, okay? So just a little of side information here. Lilith the Asteroid was actually discovered February 11th, 1927, which gives to you the idea of how relatively modern those asteroids are. They've just been discovered. They had to wait for telescopes to get strong enough to even put them in. The same with the white moon, which I'll get to at another time. Selena, the white moon, okay? These are things that, you know, now I know they did the black moon because they demonized her and everything. So I know that the character, the archetype is there for the black moon. And the same with the white moon, okay? But the asteroids, not so much. So it makes me wonder if there wasn't documentation and written materials on these things centuries ago, but they got lost because there really isn't. You'd be surprised how little there is on the black moon, considering how much she plays out in mythology. It also, once the lunar apogee has a cycle of 3,232 days per cycle, or 8 years, 10 months. Okay? So it is a cycle. That's how it got studied. That's how I know it probably did do okay in ancient astrology, because that's what astrology is based on, the study of cycles. That's how we know things. That's how we study things. It's all based in cycles and what's happened. And since it's thousands of years old, we've done pretty good perfecting that. So for us, I'm going to jump into a chart. So let's hope I can do it right. I've done this video a couple times and this part doesn't seem to take. But I want to pull up a chart here. And let's hope it stays. Okay. So I wanted to make sure I had it, and then of course I lost my chart, and you know how that goes. But anyway, we should all now be looking at my chart, okay? And in this chart, I want to point this out. So we have a 27-degree black moon in the ninth house. This is the United States chart, and we're going to look at this in a broader stroke, but it works out pretty well. The first thing I want to talk about is that this, now look at this chart, 1221. This is what I mean by the true versus the mean when it comes to the black moon. Because if we go to the solar fire chart, and I'll go to the same one, 12 degrees 21, but now, although the black moon still falls in that same ninth house, it's now in Virgo. So obviously one of these charts are based in the mean node, and I believe it's this one, and I probably would be able to change it. Let me see if I can, hold on. Well, I haven't been able to find it, so I'm not going to waste any more time. I have to go through my manual and see where but I have a feeling that that's what we're looking at. And according to M. Kelly Hunter, you can use both. That she found in her research in this book, and she even talks about it. She even tells you on some of the chart examples where the mean is versus the true, okay? And true is because we now have computers, though some programs, and I believe Solar Fire is still set for the mean, and I should go and like I say, check that out, but I have to go check my manual to where I get to that spot so I can edit it. But what I did want to do is I'm going to go through both signs because they both make sense for the United States. So let me get back here to, here we go, Janice. So we're looking at a chart where, and I want to point this out because I think this is the true and not the mean, but I'm not sure which one is which. So I'm going to just talk about them both, okay? Because they both are relevant. And it's so interesting that I can do that. The first thing I want to do is I want to point out that it's in Leo in the ninth house. Okay, so Leo from our book, okay, comes with a poem that says, "In the bright crystal of your eyes, show the havoc of fire. Show its inspired works and the paradise of its ashes." Well, that's really interesting. Basically, which I thought was really good, it's about dramatic flair. It's about being larger than life. These are some of the sayings that she uses in her book. It's about expressing yourself in creative ways. It is about, being the leader, okay, which, United States likes to see herself. But it also refers to the fact that when it is in Leo, that there's a real need for a person, individual, to love themselves, or in this case, the country, as much as they want the world to love them. So the struggle is with the self. And that's how all of these are going to work, okay? So you have this. Now, what I found so interesting here was we got 27 degrees, and then we have Pluto. And we know that we're coming into a Pluto return. If that black moon Lilith is about our desires, which are to be bigger than life, to be the leader, to be critical on the world stage. If we look at the ninth house, it talks about being educated. Here we go. I did have it. I have done this 3 times and I'm starting to lose myself here. But in the ninth house, we see things like higher mind, higher education, international travel, and universal law. Yep, it's also politics, believe it or not. It's about philosophy and having knowledge. And, in the case of the United States, thinking that, they're bigger than life, and they got to go in there and rescue. But here's the other factor I thought was so interesting. 27-degree moon in the opposite sign in the third house, the house of communication. And that's where you start to really find that there's where the struggle is, perhaps, that the world sees us one way, but we're really not that way. Okay? That we might, as people, see ourselves differently than the world sees us is but one way of looking at it. but also it's what we're communicating. Do we care about ourselves? I think what's really interesting in this opposition is that I've read statistics where we're the one country that really doesn't trust their government. And yet we probably have a more stable government than some of the third world countries, but even they trust their governments more than we do. We don't. And you can see from 9 to 3, the opposition would make it very difficult because we who are living here might be seeing the struggle that the government has with itself. Well, of course, we have two parties and we keep going back and forth, back and forth. Okay, 9th house too. So again, how telling is that? And then when the Pluto transits happen, and Pluto is in the house of worth and value, when we fight for the soul of the country, how much will the desires, which are an inconjunct, what direction will the desires take us? And the desires are things that are instinctual, okay? They are instinctual. We don't necessarily, want to be the big mouths to the rest of the world, but of course, that's sort of what it is. The 9th house is a philosophies, and it's related to what you believe. And it's almost as though, and I like the way she writes this, Lilith here is the exotic stranger. Well, I'll be honest with you, I don't think we're always liked everywhere. At least it's not been my experience traveling. But yet that is, the rest of the world is most familiar with who Americans are. Not even though most of us can't afford to travel like that. The other thing that I like about it is that that's a publishing or a gathering, for publishing type place. I think that is also significant. It's significant, and it's also significant in politics as ambassadors or power players. And then they name Margaret Thatcher and Condoleezza Rice. Both had 9th house, not Leo. Leo actually is people like Marilyn Monroe and I believe Tom Cruise, and so Robert De Niro, okay, Christopher Reeve. Those are the ones. And so again, Leo is about satisfying that urge to be lovable, and they tend to act out until they can find ways to love themselves. Okay. Now, Virgo was the other, and let me just show you that, okay? Virgo energy falls in the 9th house. And again, it is the 9th house, okay? In this chart, we have our Lilith, same spot, only now she no longer is in opposition to the moon, but she is conjuncting Neptune. And that pulls in a couple of other things. Like, for example, there is a lack of clarity with Americans. Okay. And that I can see because, first of all, we switch governments all the time. We always have to explain to foreign governments, for example, why wasn't Trump impeached at 57 votes? Because they needed 67. There's always those explanations to other countries, and it's tough to figure out how we work here in this country. I get that. But the other thing I wanted to point out with the 19 degrees Virgo placement, we have a 19-degree Vesta in this country, and that's a perfect trine. And so one of our desires is to work in goals, to really establish a work goals. The way we express ourselves is to get somewhere, to be somebody, yada da, yada da, which is also very Leo, don't you think? Okay, so we're looking at the Virgo, and let's look at the poem for Virgo, okay? What is inside of you is what is outside of you. What you see outside of you, you see inside of you. It is visible and it is your garment. So obviously there's a health factor here. And it's interesting that with that health factor, you know, the United States is a country that does make sure other countries are vaccinated. They do take care of health concerns in other countries, okay, not just our own. We really believe that we could help people there. So that, especially with that Neptune, is perfect. We may not always know what's going on. Certainly Europe never knows what's going on with us or the rest of the world. But there is this compassion when it comes to the health stuff. The other stuff that was in Virgo that I thought was particularly is the way that there's the way, and this applies to that Virgo, where there's supposed to be fulfillment for the work at hand. That, you know, it's funny that since the pandemic happened, all we hear about is how people want to get to work. I think it's interesting. I believe it was a Republican, maybe it was Mitch McConnell, that said, we don't want to give people unemployment because they'll be lazy. I don't think laziness really applies in this country. I don't think there is a high number of laziness here. I think it's the opposite. I think the reason why people get discouraged is because oftentimes they're not doing work that they find appealing, which is very, very important when you have Vesta trine this particular black moon, Lilith, okay? They also talk here about, again, the tantric sex thing comes up a lot with her, okay? In this case, however, because it's funny because they're talking about if the mean or the true position lean into Libra. No, in this case, it leans into Leo. So it's the other way, okay? It's and it really does talk about that in this book, like if it leans one way or the other. It's supposed to be the most centrally nuanced sign, which is interesting. But central just means that they're very sensitive within the context of the senses of the body, all senses. So that would be sight, taste, touch, all of those, okay? So there's this connection to kind of just seek out purity for the sake of self, okay? So they're seeking out purity. Of course, this is a heck of a place, the earth plane, to seek out purity. They consider the body to be a vessel and pay attention to what goes on with it. The needing to relax, to being... I believe that this country is at times obsessed with health. So I do believe that does apply. And I would think that there are a number of outside country or people outside of the country that would agree with that in this country, it is about exercise, diet. Let's look good. Let's feel good. You know, let's look good. It leans toward Leo. See how that all played in? So it really is quite fascinating. Another thing to do, and I'm doing it with this, is to look at the aspect list and to go into that aspect list and then to begin to, and actually now I think about it, I did do this and I was really amazed because, and now I understand why the black moon was different there. Here we have a conjunction to Neptune, a square to Mars. And this is true. We can be so caring as a country, but we can also have a military action. And our military actions don't always bode well for our reputation as a country. And if you go back here, and Mars is literally right off of that descendant, it's with our partners. And it also means that there are relationships that we have as a country with people who probably shouldn't be our partners, because technically with the Mars they're pretty much open enemies. Okay, so apparently our country does have dealings like that. So if I go back and I look at this, I can see that there's a trine for the family. And I believe that is true. I believe that the trine to the family and the trine to Vesta are very accurate. Also, our trine to Kronos, which is interesting in light of what we've just been through with the former president, okay? that we are respectful of authority, or we do have a view of what, like, for example, even if, because you're talking higher education, this would be authorities of fields as well. So it's interesting that we have that. The other thing I thought was interesting was the inconjunct to Chiron, which means we think we're special. We came in, well, that's the Leo too. That's the Leo. And the opposition to Volcanus is interesting because it also means that there is a lot of pressure on the United States with regard to what it is that it wants or desires on an instinctual level, what it's grounded in. I like to say what connects it to the earth plane, the country itself. And it's interesting when you see Chiron there, because Chiron is the person or the thing that doesn't play by the rules. It also could be turning points. And I do think that the rise of the country has been a turning point for the world. Will it continue to be that way? I don't know, because Chiron is a pretty tough call here. And then the opposition to Volcanus, again, the pressure. So when you're looking at the black moon, it is really important to keep in your mind that there are two places, the mean and the true. And that some astrologers that are studying them nowadays are studying both. We just did it. And that when you look at the black moon in a chart, you want to look for, again, applying to house and sign. If you were a first house, black moon Lilith, for example, and I'm just giving you an example, then your difficulties would be within yourself. It would be maybe you getting in your own way, or the connection is the self. Who am I? What am I? Why am I here? I mean, those might be questions that would come out of a person's mouth that had a first house. Okay. Now, I want to go back here for just a second, and only because it showed up. And again, remember, this one works with a different. But in this one, the progressed black moon is very close to the Mars. And I like this because now everything is in Libra, and it's conjuncting Mars. So here we have to get over, or we have to deal with our own, I want to say aggressive anger issues, aggression issues, the anger of other people. Remember that Libra is often seeing the other side. That is actually, in Libra, one of the reasons they're so indecisive is because they get really hung up on what the other person is thinking. When you're dealing with the second house, you're dealing with your value, your self-worth. And, this would be like people who came here to earn money and to be rich, okay? But remember that Spirit's asking you to let go of that. And that if in the United States it's also bloody important to be so darned rich, maybe that's where we need to begin to let go. So I just wanted to throw that in there. So I'm going to leave this here. I'll come back for just a sec. So hopefully I'm back. Program's not working right. If I'm not, I'm not. I'm going to send this one out regardless. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you learned something. If you have something to add, please add. I'm not an expert on this black moon, and I would love to hear what, especially those other astrologers out there, have to say about what they have found to be true with the black moon. And if any of you have used it, it would be great to hear from you. So with that said, until we meet again, I want to always wish you happy reading.